Welcome to the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Trish.
And this is our podcast. We talk about wrestling news and various topics from different promotion, primarily AEW, but also New Japan Pro Wrestling, WWE, and topics from around the wrestling world. Whatever we find interesting, and we hope you will too. We're a proud member of the Social Suplex Podcast Network, and you can find our content on our podcast feed, the Social Suplex Podcast feed, as well as on Twitter and YouTube. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. Today is Sunday, April 28th, 2024, and Trish and I, we did 3 weeks in a row, and it feels like it's been 6 weeks since we've done it. It's insane. I was like, wow, we have a lot to do. We actually have a tremendous amount to discuss. We're going to kick it off with the changed World Title Championship on AEW Dynasty, which aired last Sunday, which Trish and I watched and enjoyed. And Swerve Strickland defeated Samoa Joe to become the AEW World Champion. So Trish, what were your thoughts on Swerve's title win and the Dynasty pay-per-view overall?
You want me to be honest?
Yeah.
No. I think it's a complicated one. I think as an in-ring pay-per-view, it was one of the best pay-per-views AEW have ever done.
Yes.
I think it flowed so much better than, the last of the new added pay-per-views of World's End. I really mixed on it. And I think I don't think I can take the pay-per-view away from the build. And I don't think I can take the pay-per-view away from that feeling of just not feeling narratively fulfilled. I'm really happy for Swerve.
Yes.
I'm really happy that somebody managed to break the slot they were put into, which is very much an issue of AEW booking, that you don't move up, you move down, you stay in that position that you're slotted into. And that he fought for it. And he started fighting for it, if you think about it, last summer, and even through the program with Adam Page, when they kept trying to kind of downcycle it to like a shot for the TNT or, into the C2, he kept his eye on the world title.
Yes.
They never left their eyes off the world title, and they didn't push it in a bad way. They worked hard, and that put him in the place for this. I think he made a very good point, and I know Tunnel Talk brought it up earlier today, that when Swerve appeared on I was going to say sister podcast, but I don't think that would go very well.
I don't think Rich and James would be offended.
When he appeared on One Nation Radio with Lyric James and Rich on last Tuesday, he made a very big point that they had a very short turnaround, and I think that's really, really important and kind of how I feel kind of coming out of this. So you had like 5 weeks between Revolution and Dynasty, and in them 5 weeks you went from him losing the title shot, that babyface setback, and then a week later he's straight back in the mix for the world title. So it's difficult to have that emotional kind of resolution at the end of it when it feels like it's come across so quickly. I think they did a good job in terms of the match of trying to make it different. Like, you're not going to follow a ladder match like that, and in terms of in-ring, or something like Danielson and Ospreay. So I think they had to do something different, and just make it more around the story and around the moment.
Yeah.
But I can't help but wish it was more. I can't.
I don't disagree with you. I think the build to Dynasty was not great. We talked about it on our last episode. We talked about how kind of cold it felt. It's been, I think World's End is probably the only pay-per-view that I could even say has not had that great of an in-ring. And even then, it's not a question of people not executing moves. It's just the matches were, in my mind, kind of boring. So I'm not totally surprised that the pay-per-view was enjoyable. Although I think there was a few moments when I was watching it where I was sort of surprised by how much I was enjoying it, because I was kind of like, oh, well, it'll be fine. And then I went into it and was like, no, this is actually really great. I'm really having a good time with this. And obviously Swerve winning it was a great moment. It was, I think it was necessary to happen when it did. I think, even if it was not ideal, but yeah, they're in kind of an odd position with this title situation now, because it feels like it feels like the promotion understands that they need to make Swerve a big deal, but they're already on a back foot in terms of being criticized for how they're doing that, right? We saw a lot of folks were criticizing the way that, Swerve not having a promo on Wednesday, and obviously it was, he let off Collision last night, which had a big lead in from the NBA game, hopefully, although they did have that long ad break there. So who knows? But I think it does feel like they get that they need to make him important. I think the question becomes whether or not AEW can be focused enough in its booking to do that.
I kind of disagree with that it had to happen now. So I think that they rushed it in a way that they wouldn't do normally. And they could have given him more time in the chase, traditional babyface, once you turn from heel to babyface sense. And that would have given him more time to, become more comfortable. This is a guy that's only really been cutting kind of longer promos since September last year.
Yeah.
And kind of really get that ultimate moment. But this is the year they're in. They are going to rush things. They are going to do things that would normally, you'd spend time on. And there's going to be frustrations in that. So you are going to get moments, but maybe they don't feel quite as big as what they would. And, part of that's hurting is just that you had the narrative with Paige and then the narrative with Joe, there was no way for that to be as strong.
Right.
So you kind of feel like it's a lesser of something that you were really invested in. And maybe there's something that, part of it is that. It's interesting the reactions to it though. So I know Dave Meltzer suggested that the buy rate is, his kind of top line was 122,000.
Yes. And
they seem to kind of look at that as very much a disappointment. But it's a really interesting one because if you look at, I know his comparison is straight to World's End, but I think that's kind of an interesting one to compare to straight away anyway, because that one was a one that was much lower priced especially on Triller.
Yep.
I think you can get it down as £11.99 metric measurements from the UK. It's about $15, if we're going to go that way, $16. So, and I think there was a real difference in how those pay-per-views were constructed as well. So, World's End, the title was given huge amount of promotion in that last week. Yes. Max was doing loads and loads of kind of media and that sort of thing. Swerve did quite a lot of local media, but there really wasn't this company national push, and that's been saved for this week, as we'll discuss later on. So you didn't have that in that aspect. And it's the same, you think about when Max won the belt back in November 2022, and he had to think that 2022, and then when Paige won the belt in 2021 and Kenny in 2020, all these times had this huge promotional push that this one just didn't have. Right. Revolution had far bigger promotional push, and this felt like to me like the first time, and I think Tony's comments on the media call kind of indicated this as well. This felt like the first time where the television was the priority over the pay-per-view.
Yes.
And that kind of felt like it was then the priority over Swerve. And, that was something we kind of, I talked in our group chat that one of the things that really frustrated me is I worked out, I was like, why am I so frustrated with this cycle? A lot of people have enjoyed this cycle. Why am I personally so frustrated? And one of the things that kind of spat straight out at me was the fact that the world title is not important in this cycle.
No.
There has not been 1 week in the 5 weeks since Revolution that it was the most important thing. The first week you had the debut of Okada. The second week you had the debut of Mercedes Moné. The third week they had Adam Copeland and Christine Cage. The fourth week you had the footage or whatever. And then what was the final week? I can't, my mind's John Moxley with the IWGP.
You're right.
So there wasn't 1 week where it was the most important thing, and that's kind of continued actually this week because the most important thing is the angle with the Elite. So that was a step back from Revolution, where although you had Sting retiring, for a large part of that build and for that cycle, the world title was important again. And I think that's a factor that you have to factor in when you look at this buy rate. And the funny thing is I would actually look at this buy rate and I look at two other things. So I look at Full Gear, where the first provisional number was 125,000. Not too much difference off here. And I said this would happen to you before it even happened. But that one, the late buys were driven by the Texas Deathmatch.
Yes.
If you look at the social media kind of figures for that. If you look at Google Trends, if you look at the media coverage, whatever kind of thing you want to look at, you can see that there is a growth that is driven by that. And yet, kind of the champion got credited. Max got credited. In this one, people are comparing Swerve to MJF. And it's like, but they don't credit him for Full Gear, him and Hangman, but they, don't put this one on not having a really emotionally strong undercard match below it. Right. So I find that's kind of frustrating as well. And it's the same with, should we do the difficult subject that I'll get in trouble for?
Always.
Okay, cool.
Always.
Let's go. Okay.
I'm going to enable you every time. You know that.
Yeah, I know. Okay. This build was centered around Bryan Danielson and Will Ospreay.
Yeah.
A dream match. Forbidden Door last year was centered around a dream match between Okada and Danielson, and they hampered the build for Omega and Ospreay, especially with the Collision debut. Wrestle Dream was built around Danielson and Zack Sabre Jr., even though it didn't main event. These dream matches with heatless builds, they don't deliver pay-per-view numbers.
Nope.
If you look at the last year underneath, the Underworld's End, under the title match and the Whodunit and whatever else, you had the finals of the Continental Classic with Kingston and Moxley in an emotional match, right? Full Gear, you have Page and Strickland. You go to, I'll leave kind of All Outs all in a kind of different because of the nature of the shows, but if you go back to Double or Nothing, they headlined with BCC and the Elite, same thing. Before that, you had, underneath that card, you have Moxley and Page. So the pay-per-views that have done well, and this is that kind of ensemble thing with AEW, are the ones that have had strong emotional connections underneath the title match.
Right.
And anything where we've done this heatless kind of dream match, people aren't invested in it. I'm not to say it's not a great match. I'm not to say that it won't drive some late buys. But when you center your entire pay-per-view build around it, it's never worked for them.
No.
It's never worked for them.
And it was. It was the driver of everything. It was, they got 45 minutes that one episode.
Yeah, it's insane. So I think that's the thing. So you've had this pay-per-view cycle, which was the culmination of Swerve's chase, in effect. And it's not been about Swerve. So you now have to be very, very careful with what you do next. They need to get this run right. Not just because, he's one of the first ones to break from, his spot into another one. You need to get it right because you need to tell your fan base that if you invest in someone that comes through in AEW, that they actually mean something.
Right.
That you aren't just going to get replaced by somebody else coming in. We've done that before. It didn't work very well. So you have to get this completely right, but also you have the challenge of the fact that he is not going to be a huge TV draw yet, and it's a TV draw yet. And you're going to see that. So, this is kind of an interesting period for him to become champion in, because you are coming up against the NBA playoffs, the NHL playoffs. You don't got the Olympics and the run-up to the election. This is a really, really tough ratings year, and they need big ratings. So then you have, John Moxley leading off the go-home show for 25 minutes, not talking about the AEW World Championship or the pay-per-view, but talking about TV for the following week. Right. There's a change in emphasis and a change in kind of importance. So he has to kind of fight against that. And I think the other challenge is that he is, to me, an AEW coded wrestler.
Yes.
And that's in two senses. So in the first sense, he is very much attention to detail. Whether it be, his look. I know people criticize his clothing because anytime anybody does anything unconventional, that's not the expectation in this company, this happens, right? But he's very much attention to detail in that sense. He's attention to detail in his storytelling. He's attention to detail in what he does in the match, what he's putting into his promos. And that is something that is like a unique to some people in AEW. I think the only person that really crosses that who's came from elsewhere is probably Moxley. He's very much a mix of the two. He can move between them. But the other thing about him being AEW coded is that he will never be looked at favorably by people who judge people as draws.
Yes.
He will never be. It's just like it's like it's funny that he's so curved up with Hangman because he literally is like another Hangman.
Yes.
So,
it's going to be very, very easy for Swerve to take blame for things that go wrong. Like they're not doing ratings, the pay-per-view buys, it will be Swerve's fault. No one will credit Swerve for the things they do well. Right. And that's going to be the thing that is going to be very difficult. And I would hope people would keep their eyes freaking peeled for this. Right. Because you talked about it. Right. It's this sense of like, well, it's Ospreay, it's MJF, it's this, it's that. No, Swerve is the flip side of that with Hangman. And like, he is not a ratings draw. Okay, that doesn't mean that he cannot. We've said this repeatedly. You are not necessarily forever stuck in either being a draw or not a draw. You can be built into a ratings draw. And I think from what you saw on Wednesday, they were attempting to sort of try to bridge him into a good quarter. I can't. The number of people that don't get why people are placed in certain quarters and why they're not. If I have to hear another fucking person say, "Why didn't Trent Beretta and Chuck Taylor opening the show on Wednesday?" I'm gonna murder someone. You know why? Because Orange Cassidy is a traditional ratings retainer in the first quarter of the fucking episode. Okay, so you do a quick angle with him, you try and keep as much of that lead-in audience as possible, and then you go right to Swerve's match. It's whatever. It's fine. I'm starting to be like you with Count the Ad Breaks. I'm going to be like, that's going to be my catchphrase, is why they put fucking people in certain quarters, right? I think the frustrating thing is that you have so much, people are going, it's hard not to get the sense that people are going to want to push Ospreay, although I have been so far heartened by the number of people that are like, well, Ospreay isn't a proven draw yet either, which I at least appreciate, because I think people understand that there's a reason why, you don't want to rush that with him. But it's frustrating from that perspective that you see it a little bit, and that's even another way in which I would argue that he's AEW coded. Like you said, he's going to get the blame and none of the credit.
Yeah, because if you've been successful, even if you haven't been financially successful, but you've kind of got plaudits from another company, you're automatically given more kind of leeway.
Right.
We've seen it with Samoa Joe. Samoa Joe was kind of changed his placement in the last. They've used gimmicks for every singles match he's had. They stirred it up on Twitter with the Hook thing. He was on the back of the Mercedes thing on for that one. And in this last one, they did the footage, right?
Yep.
They've not trusted him with key positions. That program has not been in key positions in the front, 1, 4, and 5. Let's be honest, that's where the key positions are. It's not, you bury him 6 to 8. It's like, and, this week, slightly different around 6 to 8 because of the West Coast thing. But in general, that's not where the key stuff is on the show. And it's not where the perception of the key stuff is on the show. Funny enough, Adam Page goes missing and that stops happening. But Adam Page isn't a draw, right? So... oh, God.
But I think that's another piece of this, right, Trish? And that was something that I was a little bit, I don't want to say frustrated by, maybe a little bit confused by on Monday, was the number of people who were like, oh, major props to Samoa Joe. What an incredible reign he had. He brought all this validity. And I was like, I don't see it. And I'm not trying to shit on Samoa Joe. Like, I think, I certainly think he could have done more with the title reign. But again, it's not an easy thing. I get it. But at the same time, I didn't feel like he was doing that great of a job. I don't know if people were just happy not to have MJF there, or they felt like, and this is the other piece of this that I feel like is important to get into, your perception of what a world champion should look and sound like, like the bias that people have towards this that they sometimes don't even realize. And I will give credit to a friend that I'm not going to name here, but he flat out said to me in a chat, I see how all of the years of my watching WWE has it in my brain that, so-and-so's too small to be a champion. So-and-so doesn't look like a champion. He's like, I try to fight against it, but it's my knee-jerk first reaction. And like, that's part of this, right? Like, Swerve's not a good promo. Is Swerve not a good promo, or is he a different kind of promo, right? Again, I think about the Hangman comparison. Is Hangman not a good promo, right? Or is he just a different kind of promo? And I think that sometimes those like unconscious biases just get into people's brains. And that's not, I'm not trying to get into racism or any other bullshit like that. I'm just trying to say, listen, if you've had it in your, if World Wrestling Entertainment has told you for the last 25 years that a champion has to look a certain way, and now we're presenting a champion that looks differently, is that maybe affecting the way you view that? Something just for folks to consider is all I'm asking.
No, but it's right. So he uses a different cadence. He uses a different kind of, he picks a different Lexus. He has a different pacing. Hangman is exactly the same. we are going to keep comparing them because they are so similar
Yes.
in some of the ways that they operate. But they are exactly the same. And the other thing that they do, and Swerve has played into it as well, is they challenge this kind of traditional view of masculinity in some ways.
Yes.
And
Yes.
people find that really uncomfortable. And this always happens. It was, and, you think about after Full Gear, and I know our friend Amy, pointed out, a lot of the kind of more female-orientated creative sites were kind of really dead going into Full Gear.
Yes.
And then that program kind of changed that around. So there was this kind of, of this gradually kind of coming back to AEW in that kind of investment sense from large parts of the female demographics. And he played into that. They didn't shy away from it.
No.
He played into all that stuff because he knew, one, it was, it's going to help him be successful, but two, actually, it helps him with his character. So that was good. And, I don't think it's any secret since it's gone to a kind of very much more straight layered feud that's kind of, that's kind of dropped
Missing
a little bit
that.
since Revolution. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's missing that emotional element and that ability for him to be able to do that kind of character work. And he's kind of explained it, but it's very much that. So they are always going to be judged differently.
Yes.
You say, Max was made in AEW. Max is not an AEW coded wrestler.
Not
He's
in
a
that
WWE
way.
coded wrestler.
Correct. Yes.
His character-wise, the way he talks, the way he these guys that don't always rely on shouting all the time, always comes up. So so Joe, if you look at it in a traditional sense, okay, so did his reign draw tickets? No. None of the matches drew tickets either, in terms of additional ticket sales. So, okay, so what else do you look at? Ratings-wise, it's hard to distinguish his title matches because they use gimmicks every time.
Right.
So you can't even say, and then the first half and the second half are very much different. And then you have to look at, okay, so how much is Paige involved in this? Being that there is such a differentiation between the first half of the reign and the second half. So from a monetary standpoint, I don't know. I don't think there's anything special to look at that would be entirely successful. We'll see what these post buys come in at. There's always generally post buys for title change.
Right.
Other than All Out 2022, but obviously because attention was diverted. So then you've got this situation where you look at, okay, so his matches, and, I don't think, Hook match was good. I don't think there's anything stand out in any of their matches.
No.
Okay, so, and his age, he's probably working far better than we thought he was going to be in, 2015, 2016. And then talking-wise, I know people love that promo style. They love when he heats stuff up. But actually, it's really unhelpful to the babyface. So, you have to work. You're trying to get these people over. I think he toned it down a bit in the second part with Strickland.
It got better.
It got better.
But it never got great.
Yeah, but I can't look at this reign and say that it's like some fantastic title reign. I think it was a good transitional title reign in terms of what it achieved. I think it gave him stability. And I think that was probably the most important thing after the kind of chaos at the end of last year and how many people hated the kind of the ice cream flavors that were out there. So maybe it gave him stability. Right, and you can argue that he didn't dominate the show in the first part. He allowed the kind of Swerve Hangman thing to take hold, and that was really helpful for the momentum and that second story. Alongside the Sting, Darby, and the Bucks. So, I would say that, but I don't see it as some miraculous title run. But he will be judged differently, and Swerve is going to get hit by these ratings, and I need to try and keep him 1, 4, and 5 as can. So you need to put him with experienced people in order to do that. You need to put him with draws. And here's your issue. So how many heels have we got on the roster now that are free that are main event? 2? I count 2. Jay White, Christian. You count anybody else?
No.
Christian's not about at the moment, but I'm sure he'll be back shortly.
Well,
but it's
Trent, but that'll break my heart, so we can't discuss it.
Okay, but Trent's not a draw, right?
No,
so I'm
you're
just trying.
right.
And Jay's probably not a draw either, but he's at least a heel.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. We're very short. Then what have you got underneath that? Okay, Danielson's been beat by everybody.
Yep.
So there is no point doing that. Okay. So then Moxley and Jericho are now protected with belts.
Yep.
And Copeland has got a belt. Oh, and Okada's got a belt.
Yep.
Okay. So who do we have left? And this is what it gets to, is this thing that we talked about months ago about how are they going to manage it when they've got all these people that have kind of lost matches quite frequently. It's like we're now at a situation where you're like, this guy needs to have people fed to him.
Yep.
But then you also want to fed people to Ospreay because that's the thing. But a lot of these people have lost so much that you can't. So now it's like, what do you do? So the first thing is that it has to be ratings draw.
Yep.
So then you're left with very few names. And then it's like, well, do you do something with Christian? but now you're kind of talking about the elite, and you should be in that program. But it's like, who's the ratings draw on the elite for him to go against?
Right.
There isn't one currently.
Nope.
Singles ratings draw, there isn't one. So it's kind of difficult. I don't feel like they've set this up with a lot of kind of follow through, and I think that's difficult. I just think that's just a nature of where they're at currently. But yeah, he has to face all that. There's two things as well, is that I think that we can't get lost on the fact that it is their first African-American male world champion.
Nope.
And a few years ago, people were very, very much critical of diversity in AEW. It was a significant talking point, and it is an achievement that we've got to this point. And we haven't got to this point through, tokenism or anything like that. He's achieved this. So that is very much an achievement. And, when you look at the NBA stuff, people talking about lead-in, he is somebody that will appeal to an audience that is different from their standard audience and areas they struggle with.
Yes.
They do struggle in their in that audience. So yeah, he has crossover points. He's willing to run. He'll do every media he possibly can, and you need to give him that media.
He did 9 interviews on Monday. The man was all over the place putting himself out there to be on TV, to promote the show, to promote himself, to promote it. Like, he is all in on this and is doing everything he possibly can to make this successful, right? Like, and that is a tremendous, we've seen a lot of people who aren't willing to do that much, which is shitty. But again, this is part of what makes him AEW coded, I think, that he is like, I'm ready to do whatever you want. Like, you need me on this morning show, I'll go. Like, which is great. But I do... My point derailed. I do agree with you. I think it is important. I think the criticism of AEW in terms of diversity was valid. I also think it's important to point out, like Rich and James and Lyric did on Monday, that AEW's made strides in that, not just on screen, but behind screen, right? Mm-hmm. They've got people like Will Washington and Kosha Irby and Jennifer Pepperman working backstage now in creative roles, which I don't think you could say they had up until recently. So these are all positive things, but it is like there's definite pitfalls ahead that people need to be conscious of before they start, shouting about ratings and everything else.
And especially when you have, I think one of the reasons that they moved Ospreay into the IC for now, we'll see where they get to up to All In. I think things will probably change another 10 times between now and then, considering how often they change already. Yeah. So I don't think you can plot everything out. I don't think... especially even last year, things changed 3 weeks out. So I don't think you can do that. But if you are thinking about doing a short reign, then you need to be focusing on this guy. And you need to kind of be making it look like you don't know where it's going to end.
Right.
You can't just, because as soon as you say, oh, look, this is going to happen at Wembley, then you're making him transitional because everyone knows what the end is. Right. So you have to be really, really careful with that. We got a question from the Discord. We got a few questions from the Discord, actually. You can always come and ask us questions for the episodes on the Discord. We will try and endeavour to answer all of them. But I got a question that from Atlas Earth that said, upon your years of watching wrestling, what was the best booked as a package babyface world title run you can think of in any company? In a way that they won the title was good, how they defended the title was good, and how they ultimately lost the title was also good. What ought to be the template? And do you know what? This is actually really difficult.
Yes.
So I spanned through, right? And there is a reason I'm linking this in here. But I spanned through I was trying to think through all the WWE runs I've seen. And I really struggled. And I thought a little bit more about the New Japan runs I've seen. And, you start to think about Tanahashi and you think about Okada. But then Okada is like... He was always heel mannerisms, even when he won it as a babyface on the epically long run that ended with Kenny Omega. By the end, he's the obstacle. But, people will absolutely say that. But in American pro wrestling, where things move so much quicker and you've got the pressure of TV and everything like that, the only thing I can come up with in modern TV wrestling, is the Jon Moxley run from 2020. And the reason for this, and the reason I'm going to get into this, is, he won after he had a great program with Jericho going in, creatively successful, TV-wise, did great ratings, pay-per-view did well, so that was good. He kept them afloat all the way through that year.
Yep.
And then he had the great finish to his title reign with a shock finish with the Omega thing, which was a huge rating success and massively marketed. But the big thing about this, and this is why I want to talk about it with Swerve, is it didn't matter that he wasn't on every show. It didn't matter that he was wrestling, 5 or 6 matches that weren't world title matches. They're trying to portray Swerve as like a workhorse champion. We're seeing that already.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean anything unless you differentiate the world title. And what they did with that Moxley run is every single world title match he had, even like a match against like The Butcher, was promoted. It felt like you were seeing the world champion wrestle. It felt special. And in this world of belts, and my God, there's too many fucking belts.
There's too many fucking belts. There's too many fucking belts.
You've got a belt on John Moxley, who's opening your shows with another company's belt. You've got, Adam Copeland running around with a TNT belt, another experienced name. You
doing open challenges.
Yeah, doing open challenges. We'll get to that in a minute. Jesus Christ. You've got Will Ospreay potentially going to be running around with an IC belt very soon.
Yep.
You've got Okada running around with Continental Championship. All these names are more focal points to people than he is. So you need to make this special, right? So I understand what they did this week. I kind of sit in the middle. I think that they should have done a promo with him on Dynamite because half the audience that watches AEW for wrestling's sake aren't watching Collision.
Right.
So they aren't going to see that. And they didn't see his first defense either.
No.
And you can say, it makes them, they need to go out of the way and get you. They just won't. We've seen this. It's like the Kenny Omega and MJF thing. God damn it, I'm going to start on that again. But they didn't. They didn't watch it. They didn't go back and watch it. They didn't watch it on catch up on 7 days either. So they just didn't watch it. And then you've spurned that. So you can't fall into the traps. God, there's too much Hangman talk on it. He isn't even fucking here. You can't fall into the traps of what you did with the Adam Page run.
Right.
I don't want to see. Like, I understand, like, you had this lead in, so you did the promo, and you wanted to set a match for the end because it, moves over into Rampage, and you thought you'd keep as much of that audience as possible. But what if you don't? What if that audience falls away? What makes him different? What makes him different from any other belt on this show that's on someone much more high profile than he is? If you do this.
This is
nothing.
No.
You have to differentiate. Otherwise, what's the fucking point? It's like, open challenges are not for world titles. You have to earn shots at world titles. We just run the rankings back in. It's the whole fucking point. It's like, we did it with the IWGP last week. And people went off into all sorts of headspaces. No, in Japan, you challenge, you promote it. Like, even if you haven't earned it, if you don't believe someone's earned it because they've just attacked someone, I don't fucking care. You have to promote these matches. World championships have to mean something different. Otherwise, it's just a mid-card title like everything else. This is what, and Kenny's already stole my point, so that fucking worked out well. But this is what WWE did so well with Roman Reigns.
Yes.
And no one likes to hear it,
but
they did. Right? They got it spot on. Because even if you didn't think much of the matches, it didn't care because it felt like watching one of those title matches was an event to that audience.
Right.
It felt like it was important. It never, ever was under-promoted. This one, we're just going to throw a match out at the start of the card, and he's great. Yeah, he's a workhorse champion. It means fuck all. It's like, it's not going to get the results you want it to. And hey, if you want to move it on to Ospreay to All In after that, you're not going to get the results there you want to either, because you've downgraded what the title means. And they've been doing this since the Hangman run, right? They didn't do this with Kenny.
No.
Kenny got 3 weeks of bill for that Jungle Boy match, and that turned his, reign around. Because if you remember, everyone goes on about you can have a great title run in 4 months in AEW. Well, Max, it took 6 months. Kenny, it took 6 months before. And everyone makes the second half of them reigns that were important.
Right.
Hangman had great fucking matches. Nobody fucking cares. He sold tickets. Nobody fucking cares. Sold pay-per-views. Nobody cares. Perception is everything. He wasn't treated as important, so nobody believed he was important, and now they look at it as a failure.
Right.
That is what you have to avoid. And if you're going to hand it over to somebody else in 4 months and it's not going to be a heel and it's going to be Ospreay, then, you've got to work even harder. You have to make this guy important. He is going to do everything he can. And I know people say, wasn't the strongest first promo. It's not going to be. He needs to be working with people. He needs to be working with top people. It's his first reign. You can't just leave him out there in the cold or just chuck him out in another quarter. He has to be a focal point. And that's why, you look at this Elite thing. And I can understand putting him into this program. I think there are pitfalls. But the reason why I would is this is the top angle on the show.
Yes.
This is the most important thing on this show. And you can see that a mile off now. You know, there's just been a week of press about it, and we'll talk about that momentarily. But this is the most important thing. Otherwise, whatever he does is going to be behind this. And automatically he's secondary. And it's 2022 all over again.
If you want to build to televised title defenses because your television is more important than your pay-per-view right now, that's fine. Build to them. You can't just throw them out there. And that's when people are like, oh, when they talk about hot-shotting and they talk about, like, everybody lost their minds. Like, the debate over what the words car crash TV mean and what hot-shotting means.
This was hot-shotting.
This
Last night was
was 100% hot-shotting. This is what that means. You throw a meaningless title defense out there. And again, great match. Both guys are awesome. Terrific. But at the end of the day, it meant nothing. It was heatless, and the crowd didn't care that much. That's the killer part, right? It was,
and nobody's talking about it this morning as a world title defense. They're going, "Oh, it was a great match." You know what else was a great match? Phoenix and Tauros. Sorry, I can't say his name now. Struggling there. You know, this was a great match. Oh, we like this tag. We like that. They're talking about it like it's any other match. It's like, so they have to do more. You know, cut that shit out. I don't want to see it again. I get the TV thing, and I get that you're chasing it. I don't want to fucking see it. Do not do this again. This title has to become important again. You can't sit there and point fingers at the IWGP World title, and that's a whole fucking thing in itself. And then watch your own world title do this. It's just not acceptable. I will go nuts over this. I went nuts over it with MJF and Kenny Omega. I will go nuts over it every single time. Because it was something that differentiated this company at the start that's been lost.
Yes. Yes. And everybody, and this is the other side note too, right? Like, everybody has a fucking title. The part that brutalizes and kills me is the goddamn Ring of Honor titles coming out, because I appreciate that Ring of Honor has its own universe and everything else, but Bennett and Taven don't ever win on AEW television, and yet they've got a fucking title belt. Fletcher never wins on AEW television, yet he's got a title belt. This devalues belts in general, because every time these guys come out, everybody has a belt, nobody wins with them. Right? Like, that's the part that they've lost any meaning on this whatsoever. Mm-hmm. We had the phenomenal Orange Cassidy International title run, lost it to Roderick Strong. Again, Roderick Strong's great, but, like, the belt means nothing again. Right? Like, it's just, like you said, the title meant something. It felt important. It does not feel important in that way, especially when you throw matches like you do last night on. You can't hotshot like that. I get it. You can do, like, 3-week mini builds. Like you said, the Jungle Boy, Kenny Omega feud, it was cute. Little 3 weeks was perfect.
Yep.
Couple promos, cute fun segments. Let's go. I don't understand why you're not doing stuff like that.
And then, you know, the thing about the mid-card belts is, and this is where they've got stuck, right? Yeah. So people didn't move up and down last year. The belt lived in a chasm. It lived in a vortex, the main belt. So then you had this thing where we cut people off at the knees instead of moving them up and then moving it back down. And mid-card belts are for literally like this thing. So you are on your way up, but we can't put you up to the title yet. We'll give you a mid-card belt. We're telling the audience that you're on your way up. We're telling you that we're invested in this person, so you get invested in this person. People don't like I praise WWE. Fuck it. Gunther, perfect example.
Yeah.
People now know he's going up to the world title, right?
Yeah.
They've done that right. That worked. It worked, right? That is, whether you don't like it or not, that is what you are supposed to do with a mid-card belt. In AEW, what happens with a mid-card belt is you go, you get it, you drop back down, you go back and you get it again. There isn't that movement, that progression up and down. And then, you know, it's the same way. It's supposed to work like down. So, you know, you've lost the world title. Okay, so you drop down to that middle top belt, and that's telling you that you're telling the audience that they are going to go back up. We're still invested in this person. That's what they're fucking for. It's not just to give everybody a prize, to keep everybody happy. You know, you're going to have to make some tough decisions at some point here. And I get it, because you want everybody to have a segment, and you're trying to chase the rating. I get it. But it will hurt you in the longer term. You know, the thing about the Swerve title run, before we move on to the elite stuff, is, for me, I made points about he needs to focus.
Yes. And
he needs to be in there with people who, you know, are ratings draws, who are experienced, and he needs to be beating these people.
Yes.
And then they need to find something for him that's memorable. And to me, I'm sorry, I think he needs to lose it to a heel.
Oh, yeah. We can't have another one of these fucking. We can't have another one of these face. Like,
yeah,
I'm not. Sorry.
Stop pissing off half your audience. Why do you keep doing it? And it's always the audience that was invested from the start of somebody's build as well.
Right.
For somebody from outside. You can't keep doing it. You just, you've learned a little bit from it. You can see what they're doing with Mercedes, that Mercedes is going to go heel, and you can have Willow Chase, and you've learned from the stuff with Saraya and Britt Baker and all that.
Yes.
Good. That's good. But yeah, this is probably an even more important one. He needs to lose it to a heel. Please do not turn him heel within 4 months or 5 months. That's just a disaster. But yeah, I am not against him being involved in the Elite. I think the harder bit is, who does he face? Because Jack is not on that level yet.
No.
And that would, the numbers would hurt him, and then people would be after him for that. Carter has a belt. Same thing though, same issue. So if you are going to get involved and you're going to have teams of people and things like that, when it comes to his singles stuff, you're going to have to be pretty clever around that. Because the number one angle is once again the Elite.
Crazy how that keeps happening, Trish.
Crazy. Do you know, it's kind of funny, right? If you think about it, if the weird injury, non-injury FTR thing had never happened, and they'd lost the belts to the Bucks in LA, and the Bucks were, struggling with the kind of half and half reaction and all the media stuff, none of this really happens. Interesting.
Thank you, Dax Harwood.
Thanks, Dax. Yeah, thanks.
We appreciate you, buddy.
It's been kind of funny this week. So we have this angle, and what they did was they positioned it right at the end of the show, and they used. I know people kind of talk about. It's like they didn't advertise it, and they could have done this for the ratings. The episode did a 0.23, had a week lead in. Big Bang Theory was like 0.14 this week, which is very harsh. But they were West Coast Live, so they were actually thinking that they were going to pick up audience in the last 3 quarters. So what they did was they wanted this segment as the most important thing to culminate last. So they put the draws that they'd normally put in perhaps near the start or in the middle at the end. So you had quarter 6 with Jericho. I think he had 9 minutes after the ad breaks, and the majority of that quarter was Jericho. Yes, Jericho still draws, by the way. You'll tell me you switch your TVs off, and whether it's uncomfortable or not, it's something they need to monitor the reactions, and
Agreed.
There's a difference between heat and go-away heat for sure. But at the moment, I don't think he's going to do anything because you still watch his segments. You all do. You don't turn them off. We've got minute by minutes from Wade Keller from the last few weeks that also illustrate that you do not turn your TVs off. But there we are. It's a funny character actually. Don't just digress. It's a very funny character because people don't want to admit what it actually is,
They
which
don't.
is.
They don't, and it's so. Oh my god! The people.
It's just Jericho playing it himself. Is it fuck?
Well, I definitely listen. I'm not going to take credit for anything in the entire world, but it was interesting how after our last show, a bunch of people were like, hey, it seems like he's doing a CM Punk impersonation. I was like, yeah, you think?
We brokered a meeting.
We brokered the meeting.
He's doing fist bumps. The fist
bumps are always fucking killing me. The totally fake conversation with Big Bill was also like the extreme awkwardness just fucking cracked me up.
So it's pretty good. I mean, I'm quite enjoying the character.
It's making me laugh. The terrible music, the introduction, the fake belts, like the whole thing.
The fake belt. The fake belt's wonderful. It's a wonderful detail. But yeah, I understand that there is a lot of go-away heat for him at the moment. And he probably did need to take a break, and they can't do that at the moment when they're
don't have enough
ratings
people.
Focused. And yeah, they don't have enough people. So yeah, it's one of them, but he's not going to take him off TV while he still does good numbers.
No,
so,
and he does, because he's growing the audience. So I kind of am like, guys, and that was the other thing. Like, I watched the first half of the pay-per-view live, and then I turned it off right before the Jericho match. So I was, the internet was telling me that he was getting booed out of the building, and these chants were overwhelming. And I'm like, watching the show back again after that was kind of fascinating because the please retire chants were nowhere near as loud as people made it sound out like they were. And a lot of the boos and stuff were things that were in reaction to what he was doing. And there was still a mixed reaction when he won the belt at the end. So I kind of was like, guys, I don't know that you are all really interpreting what you're seeing with the most truthful and honest eyes. But listen.
It's the Cody Rhodes thing again. It's exactly the same as the Cody Rhodes thing. Yeah, Cody was still doing good TV numbers right up to the end, and that's what propelled him into WWE. And this is exactly the same thing, but the difference is that Jericho is smart enough to know that he needed a turn.
Right.
And he did. We spoke about it, him not kind of at Revolution going, why has he not spotted this? This is very un-Jericho-like. Well, now we're here. So, yeah, that's where it is. But they used him in 6. If you look at it with the ad break, he was probably the top caller in a demo in minute by minutes, I would suspect. 9 minutes of Jericho, 3.5 ad break, and then a few at the end of the gauntlet. Yeah. So they used that, and then 7, they put Jon Moxley in there, with that advertised IWGP title match. God's sake.
We can't get into that. We have too much to talk about. We can't. You could go on for like 6 months, I feel like.
The IWGP, right? The only thing I would say is if you know tradition in Japan, you have a challenger, they come, you have the match, you promote it, you have the match, the next challenger. There's a tradition there, and I think a lot of people are attached to that tradition, and this is such a complete breaking of tradition that people have found it difficult, and that's not even to go into anything else. The other thing probably for that is that they need to keep an eye on domestic attendance, because they really struggled in the fall and winter of 2021 when Jay White had the title and it was never around, and they don't have as much domestic draws to fall back on. So now they've taken off, so we'll see how that goes next couple of weeks, but it is just something to keep an eye on. But
I think it's a good point.
Yeah, so they used Jon Moxley in that space, and what they did was this is that thing about ensemble thing. So in WWE, a guy like Moxley in one of these matches would be protected. But here they wanted to protect the final quarter because that's where their big angle they were going to sell for the rest of the week is. So they double ad break him in 7, and then you have no ad break in 8, which ends up being the highest quarter of the show, higher than Q1, and then plays into the fact that you have more people watching from the West Coast feed because it's a much more normal time rather than the 5 p.m. when the show started. So that's what they did. That was how they... And you know what? They could have... If they'd advertised Jack and Tony Khan beforehand, they would have done a better rating.
I don't disagree with that. And I think they tried... I think they tried throughout the show to build it by making it clear from the very start of the show, this is going to happen. Something is going to happen. This is an ongoing storyline that's going to go throughout that went throughout the entire episode, and every 10 minutes or 15 minutes, you got reminded that this was coming up.
But I don't think that's a bad thing, you see.
No.
Because I think, they're doing lots of kind of little things for TV. Having an IWGP title match was something to try and raise a TV number. But the key with this is they didn't want to spoil that angle. So they wanted that to build through the show and then have the suspense of it and then be able to play the press off it. So sometimes it's kind of one of those things where people say, oh, you should have advertised this. Well, actually, no, because you wanted to get this out of this. So that was why they did it.
It was smart, and they did the similar thing last night where they with the parking lot match, right? It was a thing that they advertised throughout the show. They made it seem like a big deal. They made it seem like something you needed to stick around for. And, that was kind of... All right, so let's do the setup of this angle and how this is going, right? So we had Windy City Riot, which you and I discussed last time, which was... huge reaction to Jack Perry. We had Dynasty, which I don't think there was anybody who was surprised. There were people in the audience. There was fan video from the audience of people that had checked it out. They were like, there he is! Like, fantastic reactions. So Jack Perry showed up at the end of the Bucks FTR match, knocked the ladder over while Dax was about to get it. Interfered enough security, escorted him out, but he enabled the Young Bucks to win, essentially, interfered to win. And then they brought him back on this episode. They opened the episode with them all coming in the parking lot, Okada, the Bucks, and they met Jack Perry. Security wanted to get Jack Perry out of there, but the Bucks said, no, he's with us. Then you had that little interstitial with Alex Scoops Marvez, who was trying to find out what was going on, and they said, oh, we've agreed to get Tony to meet Jack in the ring. And then you have Jack meet Tony in the ring, where he just, again, I think you can see how much better he's gotten in terms of like projection and character and everything else, in that he gave a little speech, talked about Tony Khan, gave him a hug, looked at the camera, punched him in the stomach, and then things devolved with the Bucks and Okada coming out, going into a Tony Khan driver, and then that was kind of the end of the episode, was what was going to happen with Tony Khan. And then this turned into and listen, we have to give Tony Khan and AEW credit, right? Like, they've been eating a lot of shit, and I think we can talk a little bit more about the ways in which the media aid in this, but Tony Khan said, fuck it. I have an entire NFL draft. I own an NFL team. I'm going to make this work for me. And he did this angle and then proceeded to wear a neck brace throughout the NFL draft, which was discussed repeatedly on the NFL Network. It was covered on NFL.com almost immediately after it happened. Rich Eisen, who, for those of you who don't know, is a pretty major football announcer guy, who anchored the draft coverage on NFL Network, loved this so much that he brought it up repeatedly, and Tony Khan is signing the neck brace and giving it to Rich Eisen so Eisen can raffle it off for his charity. Okay? Pat McAfee, of all people, said the words Meltzer driver on that thing. So... And then we, of course, had Tony Khan doing an interview with a couple folks from the NFL Network where he had the infamous discussion of the fact that WWE is the Harvey Weinstein company, which we'll get into briefly. But I think before we get to that, the part where they did this angle on Wednesday night and they rolled it into coverage of the draft and the fact that Tony Khan was going to have mainstream media interest, and there you go. They played it up. It got it got at least 3 recap packages on Collision last night. It was all over the NBA commercial stuff, the angle itself. A lot of it was centered on the fact that Kenny is going to be making an appearance in Winnipeg this week on Dynamite. So from that perspective, I will give them credit for being like, hey, we have a thing. Let's do the thing and then push PR and advertising on the thing. We don't see this with AEW very often, right? But they seem to have taken advantage of something and made it into it feels like a big fucking deal.
They woke up. It was like he woke up and went, oh shit, we do own an NFL team. We have connections to people that go beyond kind of the wrestling media.
Right.
They go beyond kind of media kind of infiltrated by like Nick Khan.
Right.
It's like, yeah, you have these tools. So good. Use them.
Yeah.
Use them. Go all out on them. You know, you've made yourself the talk of one of the biggest events of the year. And that's a really, really good thing. You know, the Revered Young Bucks. That was
a good one.
That was hilarious. But yeah, you have to do more stuff like this. Absolutely. And, you know, they took a pasting WrestleMania week.
Yes.
They took an absolute pasting from the way that was set up, which, you know, yes, it had its 2 things that they wanted to do. WWE wanted to tell you that the bad man was gone.
Yep.
That was message 1. But the second one was the AEW is just this tiny little company. And that doesn't just affect, like, the fan kind of morale or the way that the fans perceive the product. It affects how the business side of people, you know,
the corporate sponsorship.
Yeah,
yes.
The sponsors. But more importantly, right now, it affects how the networks and the people that see you. And this is what this is all about. You know, you're getting coverage in The Athletic, you're getting coverage on NFL Films, you're getting coverage on, you know, CBS, wherever. You are doing this because you want a new TV deal.
Yes.
And you need to change that perception of your company, not amongst the fans so much right now, but amongst that business world. And I think he did a good job. You know what? I was watching the Rich Eisen thing today where he said it was one of his favourite 3 moments of the whole NFL draft. And I thought, that's a home run, you know? So
right.
you in terms of the way you had that media impact, you did perfect. And I know a lot of people have kind of made the Harvey Weinstein thing a big thing. And I think it was a kind of a targeted shot because, you know, Nick Khan's previous agency, CAA, were linked to Weinstein. It's no different, you know, from like Ariel Helwani talking, like calling him like Snowman. It's the same kind of, he's making an inference, probably less direct than Ariel was. But that's kind of the thing behind it. And I know I've seen all the different arguments. And I think, you know, you have to have some nuance in it. And saying, he's not wrong. You know, this is a company with 40 years history of, you know, potential kind of sexual offences taking place within their workplace. Yes, is his house not completely in order? You know, you have Ric Flair, Woo Energy strapped around the arenas every week. No. But he's not also wrong to say it. And
somebody fucking should, right?
Yeah,
like,
it's a war.
Nothing is more annoying than people who do not cover will, like John Pollock wants to criticize Tony Khan for saying that he can do it all day long as far as I'm concerned. Because nobody has put more time and energy into covering the Janel Grant lawsuit than fucking John Pollock and Brandon Thurston. They have an issue with it, I will listen to it. I may not agree with it, but their points are thought out and they give a shit. But I'll tell you right now, I don't really care about media outlets who will not discuss it and call it only the Vince McMahon lawsuit, right? Giving some kind of like, oh, I don't know if Tony should say this. This just doesn't seem like it's cool. Like, fuck you, okay? You don't want to talk about it. You don't want to engage in it. You want to pretend corporate officer number one still isn't the fucking CEO. That's fine. But don't fucking talk, like, the shit is, it's bullshit. It pissed me off so much, especially after all that shit we had to deal with last week about how people being upset in the way in which the media is being portrayed with wrestling right now, right? Like, fuck you. And I get that, like, as nerds, we're all nervous that people are going to make fun of us, but realistically, somebody like Rich Eisen loves this shit, right? Here's a billionaire owner of a fucking football team wearing a neck brace because he took a pile driver on his wrestling show on Wednesday. I would be delighted by that if I was Rich Eisen. It must be so boring to have to just discuss endless, they might take so-and-so, they might have traded up for this. Hey, there's the guy in his neck brace again. This gives me something to talk about that's at least a little interesting.
He literally spoke about how they were waiting for the shot, and then when they traded away to Minnesota, that draft pick, and they went down to 23, they were like, kind of like, we had this shot. So they had to then wait for that moment. So they looked at the moment, because you know what? It's fun. It's fun. To these people, it's fun. And it looks like fun to the others. And I know some people worry that he looks like a joke or he looks like this, but I don't think that's this time.
I don't think it is. I really don't. I don't see it.
I don't think he was wrong to take the shot. I don't think he was wrong to point something out. Hopefully it brings something back into the regular media. Because other than, you mentioned Pollock and Thurston, and I think, the Observer, Dave's done a pretty good job of
this week's
written.
Yes, this week's story was very good from Dave.
Yeah, so, but other than that, everybody else is in we've all moved on.
Right.
And it's just a Vince story. And actually it's not a Vince story, because we got, as we'll discuss later, there's quite a lot coming up now in the next few months where this is going to come back to the surface.
Yes.
But he had to start punching back. And it's not a perfect time. And yes, they've got a TV deal due. And all those things. But he had to start punching back. They were destroying them on WrestleMania week.
Destroying them.
And the footage was probably not the right response. But he's done it now. They're building it into an angle. And the angle is big, and it's that second hot story, or maybe that top hot story that they've not had. And it's the big difference between this year and last year. Everyone wants to talk shit about the Elite and BCC last year. That thing drew money. That thing held up episodes.
Yes.
That Moxley Omega Cage match does a ridiculous rating. That episode-long story that included the Vikingo match did a ridiculous rating against heavy competition. They held that show together while Max was struggling until Max found something hot in the summer. We need that again. They need that. They're not stupid. They all know they need that. This is this. You wipe everything off the slate, whatever plans you had, and you go, what are we doing with this? How do we get the most important people involved in it? How do we tell the best story? And you know what I love is how many people are telling me that this is a long-term story. This has been planned. And this tells
really
you,
funny.
It's great, right? But what it does tell you, look, it's not.
It's not.
Okay? This has not been planned for 6 months.
No.
It's not been planned for 3 months.
No.
Okay?
3 weeks? I don't think it's been.
It's not. However, just like the Hangman story, and people believe that was all written out since day one as well. No, these guys are really, really good at taking something and making sure that every story development that they do is linked to what they've done in the past.
Right.
They will make it feel like this story is long-term. They will make it feel like it's important. They will make it feel like detail is important. And that's what was missing with the Elite kind of late last summer that we kind of were all kind of miffed by, that wasn't there. But it is with this. And that's why you're already going, oh my God, look at this. Oh my God, look at that. Great, you're looking at the attention to detail. You're invested. That's what they need. They need you to be invested in something. And that's what was missing in that last cycle.
Yes.
So this is important.
You have to have a reason to tune in that isn't just, hey, these two guys are really great wrestlers and they respect each other. And there's nothing wrong with that. That can exist. But if you have nothing else, then it's kind of boring, right? It's kind of boring. And listen, I am here for the fact that Will Ospreay seems to be starting to be psychologically tortured by someone. I'm ready for that. Let's do that, right? Let's do it. Let's make his life miserable. I want to see the man suffer. But if he's not going to suffer, he's suffering only slightly, then let's do something else that's pretty interesting, right? They clearly seem to, and I know that people are going to go nuts, but it did seem to me, based on what they were talking about in Collision last night, with the fact that Tony Khan is now injured, he's not going to be able to travel to shows, right? And Nigel being like, well, who's going to be in charge? Like, seems like that would be something the EVPs would do. Like, clearly they're setting up the EVPs to have a reason to be more in charge than they have been up until now, right? Where they felt like paper authority figures. They felt like people who were just walking around, but reality had no power. Now it seems like they might actually get some power. That would be an interesting for a storyline perspective. I would tune in to watch that, right?
And that story's worked every time.
Every time.
Every time. And the thing about it, people talk about the NWO. Yeah, that's what that was. You had this challenge to the authority and challenge to the order. Same with, the corporation and stuff. With the Austin thing, you're basically giving a huge heel group a target, and it's the same. It's what the Elite was in 2021. You are giving them something to chase. The whole idea is that you kind of adopt all this power. You create this kind of, like this uncertainty, this kind of, oh my God, what's going to happen? And then you have to have people trying to get it back to normality.
Right.
It's not much different from the Bloodline stuff as well. It's like. And the authority stuff, if you want to talk about that in the build to Daniel Bryan's win to WrestleMania 30, it's the same concept. And there's a reason that they go back to it. But this one is quite unique because of who these people are.
Right.
And I think that's good and I think that's bad. So, the first thing is whoever opposes it needs to be people that are AEW people.
Yes.
Or people made in AEW.
Yes.
I can maybe throw a leg at Adam Copeland, considering that he's like... cut promos on the Bucks previously, and he did the rah-rah speech, and he's very much coming across as, I am going to be an AEW guy. Okay, fine. Maybe. But actually, Darby Allin. That's an easy one. Yeah, I know he's got this thing with Jay White. Fuck this thing with Jay White. Just get him into this.
Agreed.
You know what? Right? You've got the stuff coming out of Revolution. Eddie Kingston's got promos on the Bucks. You've got the long-term history in terms of stuff with even going back to the tag stuff in 2021 with him and Mox. That's an easy one. Yeah?
Yeah.
Orange Cassidy.
Another
What's this thing over? Easy. If you're going to do a fifth, then you get into the complicated thing. Obviously I'm counting Swerve as the fourth, but if you're going to get into a fifth, then you get a complicated thing, and what do you do with Adam Page? But you have to have your guys on this. You're not putting FTR in or anyone like that or anybody that's come from elsewhere, because the one problem with this is that the people on the other side who are the bad guys are the people most representative to your company to people outside.
Yes.
People that who a lot of people feel have been wronged. I know there's this concept if we all hold on to CM Punk's the babyface, even maybe the owner, but half the audience doesn't see that way. They cheered him and chanted, he's our scapegoat. They were chanting the Elite after the pile driver. Some of them cheered the pile driver. And yes, it's a shock move and people will. And you can live with this. The NWO were massively popular, as a friend of ours pointed out earlier this week. And it didn't kill the company because they were so hot. So if you get them so hot, it's not the end of the world. But there has to come a point where this company is a babyface company again.
Yes. You have to put somebody... You have to put somebody up, like you said, who is going to absolutely represent AEW. And it can't be fucking Christian. It can't be like fucking Miro. It has to be people who are recognized as AEW originals, because it would be more meaningful than it wouldn't otherwise. Yeah.
And Swerve needs to be at the front.
Yes. Yes.
You've involved Swerve now. You've done it. You've already done that promo. He would look weak if he's now not involved. Because, you can't say something like that as a babyface champion and then not be involved. And the title should be involved, because the title should be the most important thing. This is my recurring theme today. But it should be it's the symbol of power in that company. And that's why the title is always generally involved, and you end up with a corporate champion. Now, the difficulty here is that, do you have somebody in there that can be a corporate champion? And right now, you probably don't. You maybe want to do it with Okada, but I don't know if you can do that draw-wise at the moment. And he has a belt. I don't think you can do that with Jack Perry. And if you have Jack lose very quickly to Swerve, then that kind of faction loses momentum. And you kind of have to feed everything into it. It becomes like a monster. So then that leaves me with... you know where I'm going, don't you?
Where the fuck is Hangman?
I made the joke, I think I did it on Twitter, and it kind of like blew up, but it was very fun, and I like having fun with creative fantasy booking because we don't do it enough.
No!
But it's like, he comes back, okay, he was suspended from the Elite, not the company, from the Elite, okay? He wasn't, so you have an issue there. However, Adam Page has not been kind of treated well by the company in meta sense, but also not by the fan base and the company in the kind of in the kayfabe sense either. You know,
Right.
They turned on him after he had his house broken into. He spends months looking at these signs. It's part of his delusion. You know, he thinks the company of they should have kept Swerve out the match at Revolution. It wasn't enough. You know, he loses at Revolution and it's not enough. So he has enough reasons to blame the company. And you can do the full Hogan thing where you can do the rundown and he can pretend to save, or they can go and fetch him. You know, he can be drinking in his bar or in his barn or whatever. You can go and fetch him, right? And you can bring him in as that fifth guy, like a blood and guts. We've seen this a million times.
Yes,
and
it works.
And it's that thing. It's that same thing it's that core kind of idea that they made the center of Max and Adam Cole of, you know, what will he do? We
Right.
know that he could be on either side.
Right.
You know, which one wings out here? And to me, and it's not just because, like, you know, Paige is our guy, we all know it, but it's not because of that. It's like, he is a perfect corporate champion in this sense. Jungle Boy
Yes.
is not strong enough. Okada is not quite at that phase where he can be relied on for TV numbers. He is the corporate champion. And then you have that emotional thing with Swerve, and then you can play with that. If you don't want to make him champion, but he needs to take him to the very limit, whichever way, that needs to be that part of the program. He can't come back and be, you know, try and play the Sting role and be the good guy. It doesn't fit with where they are in the narrative. It doesn't fit with, you know, and even worse, God, if you stick him there and he's DDP and he stood behind Kenny Omega again, we might as well not bother. You know, no one's going to ever progress in this company. So that's kind of an important thing to work out, but they need to build that in there because especially, you know, there's reports kind of circling that there might not be a max for, you know, more months at a time. I don't know. We'll see how that works out in the next few days. But if that is the case, then he is now more important than he was before.
Yeah.
Because he's that missing guy. He's that guy from that first cycle. Him and Darby, you know, Darby's slightly less, but still, they're underneath. They missed in this cycle. So you have to get him back in. As soon as you can get him back in, and he needs to be on that. And then, you know, the other thing about this around baby-facing the company is, and it's interesting this story came out on Friday, is that there's no point in him being a babyface. He can't talk. He can't run himself through the media. He's still kind of stuck in that way because, you know, this company, in the way that WWE have tried to do Bad Man Gone and quite successfully in a lot of ways, AEW have not done that with CM Punk.
No.
They are still protecting in some ways CM Punk. And because of that, you are kind of isolating some of your top guys from being able to connect with their fan base, from being able to connect with the media. And people go, oh, you know, how could that even happen? And it's like, you've got to remember how many kind of media relationships CM Punk built over the last year. How many are kind of Punks on, you know, from PW Inside, which is a long-term connection, to Fightful, to Houseman, to aggregators like Wrestle Purists, you know, even sending things like Secondary Podcast, or even, you know, they were connected to Voices of Wrestling for some time. And even, you know, still people from the Punk camp sending things to the Observer. So, and then, God, you know, he let them do that ESPN interview, which is the center of Dave's article on Friday, which is nice to see in print after we spoke about it. That was nice. So you have cut these guys off. So there's no point baby-facing them now. But at some point, you can't continue to do this. You have to turn into a baby-face company, and you're not going to do that until the people most recognizable are baby faces.
Right.
Or at least can speak as one outside of their characters. And that is something that has to change. Do you know what's we have to digress into that Meltzer thing on Friday. Because that was a narrative and a half for people not to be able to read properly. It's amazing how illiterate people can be in terms of like reading one line. So, you know, there's someone in the company. Read it again.
This is a piece. Read it again. Read it again. And the thing I think that you and I are surprised that more people did not pick up on is the part where, you know, we talked about the Mark Raimondi interview with Punk before he came back, and the fact that there is a transcript of that and that there's a belief that there's a knowledge that there's some things in that transcript that would perhaps negate some things that have been out there. That seemed to me to be the part that was the most important, and it was sort of surprising. I know you feel the same way, that more people didn't pick up on that. They sort of there's an odd narrative with these things that kind of crops up that I always am kind of like, huh, okay.
He read like a threat to me.
Yeah.
He read like a threat. Like, things have to change, and if they don't change, then this continues and no one can move past it, then actually everybody just needs to know the truth.
Right.
And I thought it was interesting. I think it was very, I know people kind of get frustrated with the way Dave writes, but I think he does a good job of kind of protecting people in situations like this. So, yeah, it was an interesting one, because after everything we spoke about, a lot of things kind of came up and appeared there. So that was interesting. But yeah, they have to find a way to babyface themselves. They have to find a way to kind of cut that cord and move forward. And if they can do this big hot angle, and these guys can kind of be focused on in terms of what they do, and they can transfer that heat across, and then great, and Jack, it's a big opportunity for Jack Perry as well.
Right.
He's come back, he's had much better instincts. Tim Hunter on our Discord asked us, what do we think I'm going to go back up. What did he learn from kind of his time in New Japan? Do you think that it kind of made a big difference to him? And it's like, yeah, because this story wouldn't be happening if he didn't have the reaction that he got at Windy City Riot.
No.
So, and what I think was, whichever way he got there, whichever way he got to New Japan, and the time there was useful for him, because you get to spend every day doing backstage promos. You get to spend every day doing kind of heel work in the ring and like being close to the crowd, and that being the only important thing. And that's something that you just don't have, and you don't get the time in AEW, and you have so much other pressure because of TV. So it is really, really useful for him. And he came back with so much different instincts. It was unreal, even just like the looking at the camera and stuff. And
his timing is so much better.
Yeah,
the pauses are really good. Like, pausing is such a hard thing. And I remember somebody, I don't remember who was, but basically saying that for every second you think it's a second, in real life it's 10 seconds in the ring is what it feels like. So slowing down is so difficult, and he just feels like he's slowed down in the most best possible way. He didn't rush through that promo. He just took his time. He engaged with the audience. He listened to the audience, and it just, I don't know. It's been a fantastic transition. It was extremely beneficial to him.
Yeah, so he's got a big opportunity now, and I thought it was interesting that when some of the media were covering it, the NFL media, they were always talking about him being Luke Perry's son, and it's like, yes, market that shit. Market that shit like you did at the start.
Right.
If you're going to market outside of the wrestling media, and you should be, you should be bypassing it, you're doing the right thing, then yeah, he's going to be a good guy for that this year. Because he can play into it with his character as well, so you can get around the kind of the punk stuff, and that he can just use that as fuel in these interviews and just play him in character, fine. But he can go in there with these people, and yeah, he's a good-looking young guy, 18 to 34. I don't think it's a surprise that he's now back and Hook's on TV as well. They're losing. They know female 18 to 34 has been a struggle, so that's going to help with that. And there was kind of some little bit around that. I was so happy to see his shirt on sale.
Yes.
And we talked about this, and we talked about it's #1 selling shirt on Shop AEW this week as well. That was important that you capitalize on this. So yeah, he's back. There's the merchandise. We're invested in this guy. It's the same way, Swerve's shirt's on sale after being champion as well. We're not going to make the same mistakes that we made in the last few years. So I was really, really happy to see that. Do I think, Tim also asked, do we think that the footage made it even bigger or had a positive effect? And I think it goes either way. I think you do think he's a scapegoat.
Yeah.
I think he's, you watch it and you go, Jesus Christ, this guy, he did lose 8 months of his career. But if you can use that enough in that kind of deluded heel way of taking it too far or overreacting, then you may be able to get away with it. So this is all about how they transfer the heat and how they make this kind of an originals versus elite thing, and do all these things in between. And it's not easy.
No, but the conflict is always so much more interesting when there's a legitimate reason behind it, right?
Sure.
As opposed to it being just full bullshit. right? It's like there's a reason behind the conflict that you can articulate, and this is my motivation, right? Again, Tunnel Talk talks about this all the time. Why are you doing why is your character doing the thing that they're doing? Okay, Jack Perry has a motivation. And not only does he have a motivation, we saw the motivation. We can at least maybe not agree with his methods, but we appreciate and understand where he's coming from. And at the end of the day, if you want to turn these guys back to a babyface to be the babyface company, that's going to have to be something you're going to have to deal with.
And it gives other people a motivation as well.
Yes.
Currently we're just, everybody has a belt, no one has a motivation.
Right.
Nobody wants the world title again. We're back
nobody
in that.
Nobody wants to fight with anybody else.
No.
Nobody's fighting with anybody. There's nothing happening. And again, this pisses me off about the whole fucking, my best friend's open. Because it's one of the only fucking emotional feuds you have going on right now.
Exactly. So having this is not a bad thing. So go all in on it. Just run with it. Just run it as big as you can. Get as many of your big names in possible. Bring Paige back into it. Bring Cassidy back into it after that. Darby comes straight back into it. I don't care. Just get everybody that you have involved in it and really go for this one. None of this half-assed 3-week stuff.
No.
None of this lower belts and just like that. We've just seen you do that with Undisputed Kingdom. How fucking well did that work out? You spent 6 months building them and it got fucking nowhere. You can't repeat that. That's part of the reason they're struggling this spring as well, is that you spent so much time on something that ultimately has ended up a failure. So you have to go with it. These guys are good enough. They're already making you feel like it's been 6 months, and you need to get them out in front of the media. You need to, I don't care if you do it in character. That's probably the good thing actually now, is they can go out in character and they can, get around stuff and just go fuck it. Yeah, just run with it. Because you really did need something. It's a big chance.
You need something, you have an opportunity, and we'll probably discuss this a little bit more on, but you've got a chance here because WWE is going to soften. This summer is going to be rough. Like you got a chance here. Like, you can change the narrative about the company. And no.
So, all right.
Great job by us, Trish.
Well, we'll go on to the next question.
All the answers.
I can't do self-praise. Come on. No,
Embrace your masculine side.
Jesus Christ. Oh, that's what football's for. I can't do any more than that. No. So Rambone Slampig from the Discord asked if there's some tension between doing everything possible to pop ratings ahead of a new media deal versus building a solid foundation for future success by investing in future stars and giving people TV time to work things out and grow. How do they get the balance right? And that's a difficult one this year. I don't think there is a balance. And I think his comments are very much, he's very much prioritizing TV. He made that quite clear on the media call. This is the first time we've ever really seen that. You've also got him still talking about acquiring people. And the reason he's doing that is that you're trying to basically build your own kind of portfolio of stars. Yep. And it's selling point. So there is going to be less development this year. But I would argue that there are people that have not been fully developed or have not had the focus on them that they should have. So it's a difficult one because you have so many people. But I think there's a thing that you need to have more competitive matches. Yeah. And I think that's definitely something that's come down into people's how they feel about their live experience and how they feel about watching the weekly television, is that there's so many kind of dead matches in terms of, we've seen this guy wrestle this guy. We've seen people like that. It doesn't mean as much, so you're now at the point when you need to do more. So in terms of these people developing, it's getting them into emotional storylines. It's about getting into something that actually matters rather than, I come on, I have a good match, I disappear for another 3 weeks. Right. And that's kind of needs to be the focus. But yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit of a tumultuous time in terms of until they get this deal kind of done. And that's something that we kind of have to keep in mind when they do things, but they do need to keep in mind their overall kind of outlook and who they are looking to develop, because you don't want to damage people in the meantime. And that's kind of the whole thing that we were talking about with Swerve. It's like, you have an opportunity with this guy, you need to kind of back your horse, you need to run it and see how it goes. Don't undercut it just because you know that you've got these other things. So I think that's kind of next. Last kind of AEW question was from Seth from Discord. We get loads of Discord questions. Yeah, come and ask us questions. I'll answer stuff in there. I'll just talk to you about silly things as well. I love it. What was he talking about this week? Actually, was this
Oh, I was talking about asking people about their clothing choices and stuff, wasn't I? Yeah. I was becoming full tunnel talk. Seth from the Discord asks, so once they get their TV deal, will they be able to transition out of startup mode and with result in greater investment in AEW infrastructure? Do you have any idea what that new investment will look like? Any specific changes, departments still likely to be left more behind? To be honest, no, I don't think anybody does until they know how much money they get. And I think that's kind of a big part of it. There have been some areas that have had investment. You know, production's had quite a lot of investment, you know, in terms of an overhaul. You've seen more kind of detail in the video packages. The social media side is slightly better in that regard. Do you know what the one thing is that I think would change the perception of AEW? That it's not even something that they need this for, but something that they've lost, and it's that babyface company thing again, is that this is probably the most insular this company has ever been.
Yeah, I agree.
The relationship with the fans is nowhere near what it used to be because they are completely cut off. They don't do meet and greets. If I was Swerve Strickland, I'd be going to Tony and say, I'll do a meet and greet every fucking show.
Right.
I would absolutely do that. That's kind of what these should be. You know, they don't do anything like that anymore. They don't do the fan fest anymore. You don't hear about them doing as much of the charity or meetup stuff as much anymore. We don't see. And even things like, you know, when you're promising somebody a live event experience, when you're doing a show near Cincinnati just across the water and you advertise Jon Moxley and you don't deliver on him, you are disappointing your fan base. So if there's one thing that they need to look at in terms of investment, it's even more simple than that. You know, even if they're not going to, I know, yeah, there needs to be investment in kind of the merch side, there needs to be investment in the live event side. We all know the areas they need investment in. But they have to make this company more connected. I don't know, people say it's not as important now because of all the media money, but you have to keep that audience happy, especially this year. So I think they could do that now. Unfortunately, a lot of the people that were involved in that aren't with the company anymore. And you can feel it. You can feel it.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Well, I think this is where you miss something even like BTE, right? Which again, you used to see, it wasn't just that you saw like the Young Bucks or whatever, but you saw all this whole other coast of characters. How many folks, like even Sammy's vlog, which has gone away, right? You had a lot of these backstage people that you got to recognize, and private parties still do that. And obviously, you know, but there were a lot of people who were super excited that, what's his name? The security guard that's always with the private party, videos, that he was the one who pulled off Jack Perry's mask, right? That's the kind of Easter egg stuff that like the long-term fans are going to recognize and are going to be involved in, and that makes people care more, right? And I think that's something that they do miss that. They do miss stuff like the meet and greets. I think it does hurt that social media is so shitty that a lot of these wrestlers don't feel like they can engage with social media with their fans, right? Because they have to sit through a fucking million comments. You know, comment moderation on Instagram, on YouTube would probably go a long fucking way, right? Like, and that's a difficult job to do, but you know, that would be helpful. I think there's little stuff like that. Yes, they do need to obviously staff up merch and staff up PR and all the stuff that we talk about. But there's little things and, you know, maybe a little bit more organization in terms of who we're going to see and when, right? Because like you said, you're going to advertise Jon Moxley in Cincinnati and then not have him show up. You know, it's not great.
No, it's the thing that, you know, when we discuss ratings as well, that's kind of weird, is that they are doing so much to raise value as a group thing amongst their programs that it kind of goes unnoticed. So I was kind of looking earlier about what they've been doing with Rampage. So we just had Rampage on the back of Collision. Yes. And they used the world title and then the parking lot brawl to kind of do that kind of transition over to kind of retain that audience for Rampage. And they did exactly the same thing. They never used to do this, by the way, but they did exactly the same thing when they had the Adam Copeland Christian Cage match. And they used that to transition over into Rampage back in on the 20th of March. And the thing that it's kind of a complicated one, because from your fan base side, people say, oh, no one wants to watch 3 hours of content. You know, they don't want to watch 3 hours of content in one night, and you see the drop off in the third hour of Raw. But the third hour of content when they're doing it currently is holding up better because of the way they're doing it than ever before. So you had Rampage on its own sat there doing, you know, 0.11 average for this year, and then you put it opposite Dynamite on back then and it does a 0.18. What's more valuable? You stick it after Collision, and Collision's retaining, from Rampage 93% of the previous audience of the last 3 times it's been next to that. You have this thing where people are actually more willing to watch wrestling than anything else. I mean, they tried All Access, that didn't retain, what did I have at? 34% of the previous episode audience. Rose to the top, 45%. So it's like, they're going to go into blocks. So sometimes when we look at these ratings and we look at the kind of fan investment, you can kind of see where their focus point is, because that's what's kind of increasing their value. And that's something we just kind of have to live with a little bit at the moment.
Yeah.
But it's, and we'll see that this week. Rampage is coming after there. I would put money on Kenny Omega being the last thing on the show.
Yeah.
And that bleeding into Rampage to hold that number up.
They should do what they did this week. They should tease them the whole show, right?
Yeah.
It should be a show line, storyline. It should be a long drawn out thing. It should be very similar to what they did this week. Like let's again pay off my investment in watching it, right? Give me a reason to stick around for a full 2 hours.
Yeah, and Kenny's, that's a big return. That's a big name. You're coming off all this media hype. So you need to get, you've got other things on that card as well. Jericho obviously was going to be on a card. That's a local draw. We're in Winnipeg. So, yeah, you're going to have this. You have to get it right next week. It's a very important week. The follow-up is always the thing that we always challenge AEW on. Other people challenge AEW on. So this is a huge week. And it's going to be very interesting how it happens. And it's a good time to do it. They picked the right time. We spoke about this months ago. That you wait until after WrestleMania.
Yes.
You wait until they've culminated all these year-long storylines and whatever else. And you've had your babyface, your Sami Zayn babyface title win. And you've had your LA Knight win. Okay, well, now they're at ground zero in terms of building up again. They literally go back to the start. So, and now you can see that, there's some kind of softness in some of the numbers. It's a very mixed bag in some ways, not in others, but it's that softness that we didn't see this time last year because they still had the ongoing stuff. So this was a good time to strike. It was the right time to strike, but it's all about how they build off it, because you're maybe not going to see results straight away in the first few weeks opposite the NBA and the NHL. But after that, it's where you come out in June and then going towards All In. That's what they're targeting, because that is, that looks like where their kind of their obligation to only have discussions with WBD ends.
Yes.
Yes.
They're in an they're in an exclusivity window right now at WBD where AEW cannot bargain with other networks or entertain offers from other networks for their content for the next TV renewal. They can only speak with WBD right now. That will end, and it based on some stuff people said this weekend, it does seem like that would be around, like you said, June-ish.
Yeah, which is 6 months before the end of the deal,
which makes sense.
So that's where you want to culminate. You don't want to culminate in the next month. You want to culminate then, because that's when you want to give the biggest possible kind of window to your potential investors that we're getting hot. This is gaining momentum. So that's where you're targeting. So people that are going on about next week's rating is like the be all and end all. No, it's not. And actually, they're going to sacrifice a bit of it because they want to put Rampage up. And it's the same thing they did, with Collision last week, where you could add a slightly bigger Collision rating last Saturday with the end of the FTR and PAC events, the Bucks and Okada. Again, a match that would never have happened before a pay-per-view previously if we were just prioritizing the pay-per-view. But they bled that into Rampage to hold, and then the Mox promo to hold Rampage up. So there are these little things. They are looking, for me, I was like, they have to culminate in the summer, not now.
Yes.
So you are building for the summer. That's it. That's where they should be aiming for, and that's where, it's going to be, there's going to be things that are going to be weird. They're going to have to kind of jump all over things, but as long as you keep the main priorities, and if you can get something hot, then they'll be a lot better off. And then, you've got the international TV deals to look at. You've got a lot of places that have just lost their TV deals to Netflix for WWE. So there are things that you can target after that. So in terms of things that you can do after you sign a deal, that should be your next priority. Is how can I create extra revenue in these other places that may be looking for wrestling content that's now moved to Netflix. Right. So I know Dave spoke a bit about that this week, and then it replaces some of the deals like the Days On deal, the Univision deal, which weren't worth too much, but are now kind of not there anymore. So there is something to be done on that.
They did seem to highlight that a little bit because they brought in a new Spanish announce with, who's historically, and I'm going to sound like an ignorant person not knowing his name, but, they brought in somebody who's an ex-WWE person who's very well known, and the Spanish announce the Spanish announcing for AEW has been sort of historically criticized by Spanish-speaking people as being pretty bad. So making this better seems like the first step in terms of saying, hey, we want to sell this to another audience, right?
Sure. Yeah. So it's all those little things, and
Yes.
that's the follow-up. But this is their priority, and it is the lifeblood of of this company this year. And they had challenges, and they've challenged themselves in some
Yes.
ways. So, yeah, this is where they're at. I hope it takes off. I think a lot of us are invested in what happens next. It doesn't seem sure, and that's cool because a lot of things are too predictable sometimes. So, it's it's a good change. So. But yeah, and they do benefit from the fact that WWE are challenged in some ways.
They are, it's been kind of interesting because we talked about this and said, hey, it's not always going to necessarily be smooth sailing for WWE. They're going to struggle a little bit. And one of the things we're dealing with right now is they've lost a lot of people to injury, right? Mm-hmm. So they have lost Seth Rollins to injury. They've lost Rhea Ripley to injury. She's a huge deal for them. Dom Mysterio's now got an injury. It's unclear how long he's going to be out, but he is out for a little while. And Uso is injured. I believe it's the non-yeeting Uso, although I'm not entirely confident in terms of which Uso yeets and which Uso.
No.
It sounds like eating.
Jay is the eating Uso.
So I think it's Jimmy that's kind. We could Google this, but why would we?
Jimmy's the one that hurt. Jay is the one challenging Priest that's the eating Uso. Oh my god.
Sometimes you just got to lean into how ridiculous wrestling is. Will we eat? We do not know. We do not
eat
think
or
eating,
not to eat or not to eat.
That is the question. We're a little slap happy today, friends. But yeah, they've got, who else is out? Roman's out for the unforeseeable future. He even said in the draft, he removed himself from the draft because he wasn't going to be around. It definitely seems like there's some opportunities here. If you look at some of the resale markets for some of these Raws and SmackDowns, they're looking pretty crazy. Some of the tickets are not, their sellout streak ended, right? Mm-hmm. Weirdly, we did not get a Fightful report about how the sellout streak ended, even though we've gotten a lot of Fightful reports about,
neck and neck with the NBA draft this weekend.
Right.
NBA, NFL
whatever
draft even. Yeah.
Whatever record they broke for, we get for Sheboygan, right? This is the highest gate anybody ever had in Sheboygan. But we didn't talk about the fact that the streak ended. But yeah, there's definitely some opportunity here. And I think, one of the things that got brought up this week that I thought we both really appreciated, and this comes from a question that we had from user Shabugan on the Discord. How much of the anti-AEW media slant do you think comes from willful attempt to curry favors with WWE versus dumb sensationalist headlines designed to garner rage clicks from AEW fans and interest from AEW haters? So this came up because Voices of Wrestling, and we tweeted about this, did a fantastic piece, Joe Lanza did, on the way in which WWE manipulates the media. And if anybody has been on wrestling Twitter in the last week or two, the meme of the Le Gentile
Simpsons thing.
It's very good. I had somebody send me a message and go, I'm behind. I don't know what this Le Gentile thing means. And I had to explain it. They were like, oh, okay. Because essentially, and I think what's funny is how this is now turned against WWE in some way, because you can see that this is being applied to stuff that isn't necessarily something that WWE is planting.
It's actually going like way over. And that tends to be how it is. Everyone starts looking for something and then it's like everything is this. And sometimes it's not, So that story in the Jacksonville local news on Wednesday wasn't planted by WWE. It's just a guy that hates the Khan family. Going back to stadium disputes.
A local person.
Yeah, a local reporter. So it's like one of them things where you're like, okay, yeah, no, there are things that are being planted. The story with the releases,
yes.
What did it? The more respectful releases.
It was kinder, more respectful releases, and then you have Cameron Grimes sobbing into his freaking camera, like sobbing. I felt so terrible for that guy, right? Because you never want to see somebody lose their fucking dream, right? Regardless of whether you think, oh, you shouldn't have believed this or whatever. At the end of the day, this is someone chasing a dream, believing in a dream, desperate, wanting to work for WWE. Whatever you think of that, and it getting let go. because he pointed out to someone that he was still being paid, even though he hadn't been on TV. And then a week later, they let him. I mean, that was just brutal.
And it was kind of interesting that it was done during SmackDown. And so it was kind of that thing of not having the heat on Triple H, who they say was ultimately the decision maker, which is a very Vince thing to do. You know, this guy didn't cut me. So now he has like Chris Legento, who we've talked about, who was head of communications. He's now head of talent relations.
Right.
So that's kind of been an interesting thing to come through. But there's other parts of that as well. So you had Drew McIntyre resigning.
Yes. This came out last night, and the way we found out that Drew McIntyre had re-signed was through an Instagram post by The Rock Dwayne Johnson, okay? So not an official WWE release, not something that Triple H or the Talent Relations Group is behind. The Rock told us all that Drew had re-signed. Like, that just felt like a fucking power play.
Yeah, and obviously he's aligned with Nick Khan.
Yep.
And Chris Legento is Nick Khan's guy. So it felt... Is it the first time The Rock has done anything kind of publicly in the kind of TKO board style role?
Feels like it. There may be one or two other things, but that certainly feels like
they're still arguing about where's his documentary. Apparently he wants to look well in. You know, that's still ongoing. So there is kind of an interesting terms of the power player stuff there. And I need to make the point, actually. So... And the other thing that happened this last couple of weeks was we spoke about Triple H last time around about Paul Levesque. And people got very upset about it, which was great.
The Levesque era.
The Levesque era. So understand this. He was all over TV in the last few weeks as well. And he's taking quarters with no ad breaks and being ad break protected, even to the point where we bullied Dave into mentioning it.
We did?
We did. We bullied them on the board dimensional wall. No, but it's that thing of, you know, it shows, one, the lack of talent that they have on TV. And I think Raw this week was very much a symbol of, well, this past week, it's all come out on Tuesday, it was very much a symbol of how weak the roster is now. It's kind of, the part-timers have disappeared and the injuries have kind of kicked in, which is very similar to how it used to be kind of in the mid-2010s. So he's out there trying to add star power. But also, you know, this thing is, so people were like, oh, you know, how can you say TKO weren't happy with him? No, we didn't. We said that there were some concerns, and that's what Dave said. But we also said that he is under constant evaluation. Yeah. That's the point. He's a constant assessment. They have to accrue kind of growth constantly.
Constant growth.
Yep, that's how it works with UFC, and that's how it has to work with WWE. This is not a family business anymore. They can't go into a massive downturn like 2003 to 2005, 2006, and get away with it. That won't be accepted. He's not on the TKO board. You know, he's a middle manager. That's his job. He has to achieve. So things like, you know, this is quite a challenging time going forward for him in that regard.
They had an absolutely incredible year last year. We can't understate the amount their ratings went up when you compare it to the overall decline in television ratings was incredible. The fact that they had the number of sellouts that they did, the fact that they had the kind of, that they've decided to move a lot of their pay-per-views overseas and the site fees they must be getting. Again, they had an incredible year. Not just maintaining that, but growing on that is incredibly challenging. And that's what Triple H has to be doing constantly, right? And plus you've got clearly some kind of power struggle going on in the background with Rock. And the fact that Gerwitz, however you pronounce his name, he was redacted from a filing about Rock's compensation, right? That came out, that was filed. And again, WrestleNomics is going to have gone into this way more than we will. But again, that was fascinating to me, right? Because they redacted a name in that, and it was very clearly Gerwitz. Like, what's going on there? Like, there's something going on back there, and the full picture hasn't come out yet. But if you think everything's hunky-dory and everybody's best friends backstage at WWE, this shit could explode real quick.
Could be interesting. I know people made a lot of, like, Nick Khan selling all his shares, but that was actually something that was put in place a few weeks ago. You know, so, you know, again, WrestleNomics did a great job of highlighting that. But the reason why that became prominent again was in the wake of Tony Khan's comment. They released, they wanted that kind of news out there that Vince was selling all his shares to kind of remind their partners and that Vince is gone. They were doing that again. So it wasn't like this was a new story. It was like, it was their kind of way to manipulate the press to say, you know, we're just reminding you, this guy's gone. and the Nick Khan stuff kind of came out at the side. You know, he's got a huge new contract, so it actually makes sense that he was doing this. Until I think he's with them till 2025, so that's kind of where you want to look. So that's where you're kind of be looking at with him. So it's kind of one of those things where people kind of jumped on something. It's probably not quite right, but there is definitely a struggle in some ways there that may soon, play out at some point. And there's other challenges as well. Both of these guys are on the board. There was a waiver of summons that is due May 14th. Is that correct? May 14th?
I believe so. I believe it might be slightly later for somebody.
Yeah, there was a free date. So May 14th for the first one, which was from Vince McMahon. And then
this is Janel. Sorry, just to explain everybody, because we're doing that thing where you jump ahead and assume everybody knows what we're talking about. Janel Grant's lawsuit requires that the defendants that are named in the lawsuit respond to the lawsuit within 60 days of having received it. And there just was a notification within the last couple of weeks of when these lawsuits were received by the named people within them, and so they will have to respond to these lawsuits in the month of May is when this stuff will come out, and that means it will determine what is their defense, what do they claim is the reasons why. This is where we're going to figure out whether Johnny Ace is going to go along with Vince or is going to say no, everything is going to back up Janel Grant's account. We're going to see what the WWE has to say about what happened in this. It's going to be very, 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 very interesting.
So you've got that, and that's the thing, is that they want people to forget that WWE is a defendant. They want people to forget that that's coming, and that's going to be a major story. And with the Harvey Weinstein case coming back into the kind of media limelight, that will likely shine more of a light on them as well. And that's something that they're going to have to challenge, PR-wise. And that's something that's obviously in the mind of others, because Vince now has a new PR guru, someone for crisis management with who has he got? I have
he previously represented Harvey Weinstein, but he dropped him. Satelnik or something is the guy's name. I can't remember.
Satiric, that's the one.
Thank you.
Yeah, so and it's an interesting one, because what Vince is actually pushing for is for this lawsuit to move to arbitration, saying that was a condition of the NDA. Janel Grant's side believe that the NDA has already been kind of violated by the non-payment and therefore should be thrown out, and that's the kind of crux of this latest dispute. From the statement that he's made. And it would be interesting that you are hiring someone for a PR arm when the kind of things that you're doing is trying to kind of assassinate her character, not to say that you haven't done these things in that way. So you're not, and maybe he will, and once they get the response from the waiver of summons, is that he will list out, a response to each thing. But it's like, if it goes to arbitration and then it's not in front of the public, I don't know how you can kind of recast your image. I think that's very difficult, because you can't then say that these things, everyone can argue whatever they want out afterwards. You can put out whatever you like, it doesn't really matter, because no one's going to see it. So it's very interesting that he's looking to go to arbitration, but then also hiring a PR firm to work on his image. And then we saw a little bit of that, didn't we? We see the
NBC article. CNBC article that was published that was absolutely... So this one was a kicker, which I think many of you will have read it, but if you didn't, the highlights of this were the fact that Vince brought back a bunch of dogs and puppies and kittens from Turks and Caicos when he went on a vacation. The flip side was Triple H and Stephanie McMahon do not speak to Vince about business. Okay, and I should replay that, because now it's Stephanie McMahon Levesque. We're making sure to change the name. Sure. They don't speak to Vince about business. It didn't clarify they didn't speak to him at all. They don't speak to him about business. And the other killer was that The Rock and John Cena are still in communication with Vince McMahon. Okay, again, The Rock is a board member of TKO. So you want to say right now, bad man gone. He doesn't have anything to do with the business. He's not involved with the business. He still has his office has not been touched, right? That was the other thing. Which is a real fear thing.
That's a real fear thing.
Yeah,
that
really is.
That tells you everything. There's some real fear there, yeah.
People don't think he's gone. He cleaned his office out, right? And it was very much a puff piece. It was very much something that you could clearly see the hands that had that you could clearly see who wanted certain pieces of information in there and who didn't, right? Again, you want to talk about the potential power struggle between Triple H and The Rock. It certainly seemed like there was a heavy bunch of information that had come out from the Triple H Stephanie McMahon side that they wanted this to get published in this article. And then it makes you question, like, geez, were they the ones letting us know that The Rock was still in touch with Vince? Like, that's the kind of stuff that you're doing, like, a lot of 3D chess with shit like this. That's
Sure.
always super fucking fascinating as to who wants you to believe what about what, right? But, like, the WWE is also in a tough spot here too, because they have to respond to this lawsuit. And they can't do what Vince is doing, which is trying to make Janel Grant seem like an absolute lunatic psycho who's lying, right? There's a real danger there to the WWE if they try to do that. So they have to somehow point out that they're not involved in this. They have to mount a defense to it, but they can't necessarily go too hard on her or they're going to look like giant pieces of shit. Now, do they care about that? Maybe not. But, it's some...
The thing is they've already set out their kind of media standpoint.
Right.
This guy's gone. He was bad. We've got rid of him. You've set out that standpoint. So it's hard to then regress. And, the key point is the guy in the middle is John Laurinaitis, who at the start of this, his lawyer was basically saying he was also a victim and gave credence to her claims. So where he goes with this is key. Absolutely key to where this goes going forward. But it's a complicated one, but it is going to kick back up in the next month and a half. And they are going to have to find their own way through that. And then, the question then becomes of the culture. And it all depends. Wrestling media, one thing. And there is an absolute massive role for wrestling media. Because if you look at, like, the Royal Rumble press conference, the question that Brandon Thurston asked caused so much, like, of the higher, the regular media to look into things and to report on that it really kind of snowballed. So that's where it's important. You have this ground-based operation that can access this and not ask things like, what's up, legend, for fuck's sake.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Just embarrassment.
Yeah. So you have that's the role for wrestling. Well, wrestling media can only do so much. But you can create extra attention on these things and you can ask these questions. But one thing that wrestling, media need to do and will not change is they need to try and help with the culture, because you can have this top level media coming in and they can deal with certain individuals, but they're never going to look too much into that. They're never going to be able to help change things. And the reason why is that I don't know if a lot of these media people want to change anything. No. I don't know if they see anything want to change. Here's my question is, we've seen this with, like, the Gulak story, right? So you have a story where Ronda Rousey makes an accusation. He has a response. WWE don't tell us there's an investigation because there's no clarity. Like there is, I always talk about football, soccer, whatever. And the reason why is some of these issues are, something that have been apparent or discussed. And, we're now putting things in place where there is more communication to the outside world in terms of what's going on and what was previously a secretive industry. And this is what we're talking about in wrestling. So there's no kind of communication that there was an investigation or the results. And then there's more discussion within the media on how he was kind of killed off on NXT than there is about what actually happened and why. Right. And so part of that is, I think some people find it really difficult to discuss it. And not everybody is, not everybody's a journalist, I understand that, but they won't even approach it, or they think their fan base doesn't care about it. And I think there is a element of asking, does the people that consume wrestling actually care about the culture and want to improve it? Or is it a mixture of, this is something that we use for our escapism, but this is something that we use to kind of avoid things in our regular life. I want to kind of believe in the on-screen, but I don't want to know the rest. And I think that's something to come to grips with. And I always think about that, how many times, how much, we've always known things. We've always known things were going on. You can talk about stories all the time. You can talk about things, and we just kind of let it by because we're invested in a character or a story or something like that. And I also think, there was there's a famous quote. Stephanie McMahon tweeted something back in 2016. Yeah, 2016, when she said, "Philanthropy is the future of marketing. It's the way brands are going to win." and it was from like a conference. And there is an element of that. So I always wonder if, in terms of wrestlers or fan base, if a brand or a wrestler is like an advocate for something, is that enough for people? Do people just go, I want change, these people are talking about change, but we're not going to follow up on anything? And this is such a secretive industry where everything's based on your own personal brand, and you can easily be blackballed, or kind of, it's still the will of your entire career can be on one person. Right. So it's so difficult. But we have all this. We have all these things with Vince. This felt like an opportunity to change that culture. And yet it seems to be just as secretive as ever. And it seems to just be passing by. What do you think?
I think it's frustrating because you have somebody like Ronda Rousey who's willing to speak up and say, this happened to me. These are the ways in which I was, and again, I said this the last time, like, I think most women would be familiar with the kind of thing that Ronda Rousey is discussing, right? Where a man makes it, and again, this is Ronda Rousey is saying what happened to her. She believes that this was a situation in which a man was doing what he could to sort of make sure she understood the power structure, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to touch your sweatpants. Now, this is one of those wonderful things that it's very, 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 very hard to explain to a guy, because men often want evidence. And you saw this, it disintegrated even on Wrestling Observer Radio, where Meltzer and Alvarez kind of, the situation deteriorated. It started off really strong. They both discussed it very well. And then it sort of deteriorated into the specifics of exactly what happened. And the machinations of the hand movements and this and that and another thing. It's irrelevant, right? It's irrelevant. Because what it is I can tell you that I know in my gut that this man is trying to make me feel less than and trying to make himself feel powerful. And he's trying to put his hands on my body in a way that makes it clear that he's in charge, right? Mm-hmm. But it's very difficult to express that in a way that doesn't make me come across like a weirdo bitch, right? Like, why are you objecting to that? Like, what's a problem? You're being a freaking prude, right? Like that kind of bullshit. We've all heard it, mm-hmm. right? We've all heard it, okay? So it's like one of those things where, to Ronda Rousey's credit, I don't think she was trying to tell the story because the specific instance was a problem for her. She was trying to point out that this was a situation in which someone as low on the totem pole as Drew Gulak felt that he could touch her relatively close to an intimate place on her body, and she was one of the most popular and well-known stars in WWE at the time, right? So what does he feel like he can do? Her concern is, what does he feel like he can do to people who are not as powerful as me, to women who don't have the kind of pull that I have, if this is something that he feels is acceptable to do in a group of people on top of that? Because according to both of them, there were a shit ton of people around when this happened. Right? But Ronda Rousey then also complained about Logan Paul and complained about not having rehearsal time. And so as a result, we're going to focus on this. I think one of the Ringer podcasts spent a very long time today focusing very hard on her complaints about Logan Paul. Logan Paul's a tremendous athlete. You know what I mean? Maybe if Ronda was a team player, right? So now we can dismiss what she has to say about the culture because she complained about something, and Ronda's kind of a bitch and we don't really like her anyway, and yada yada, she's problematic politically and all this other stuff. You can get right, you can dismiss it. Right? Because the issue is not a woman discussing the culture. The issue is this specific woman saying a specific thing I can't relate to, and and that's how it happens. You get away with this shit because it's like, well, I don't have to listen to Ronda Rousey. Everybody doesn't, and the number of people are, well, Ronda Rousey's problematic. And it's like, well, yeah, of course she is. Like, you don't necessarily have to be like Lily White. And this is the part that everybody loses their mind over, right? No woman is ever going to have a perfect, you have to have the perfect victim. This gets discussed with sexual assault and rape all the time. The perfect victim who has never done anything wrong in her life. She's never had a drink. She's never kissed a man. She's never done nothing, right? She's done nothing to deserve to be assaulted. Okay? Because if she has, then you can kind of like Vince McMahon. Hey, she had a boyfriend. Her father didn't die when she said she did. Therefore, she must be lying about everything else. Right? So you kind of get away from that. And it's like, you don't want to believe bad things about people you like. You don't want to believe bad things about people who portray characters that you like. And it's easy to believe that someone's lying or making it up or exaggerating if you already don't like them. And I think women, especially in a male-dominated, where the fan base is primarily male as well, right? Because that's the other big part of this. It's not just the people backstage, the fan base. There's a specific type of woman that the WWE fan base is willing to engage with. And there's a type of woman that they're not. Ronda Rousey is not, a woman who could kick your ass.
She's also a very powerful woman that can talk because she has the freedom, financially,
Right.
and the platform to do so that
She
most
gives
people
no fucks.
don't. Yeah, essentially. So it's one of them things. So a lot of the things that we've been talking about this year, and that you might think they're very extreme in terms of their importance or anything like that, but the theme of a lot of these episodes, whether it be the Punk thing or Vince or anything else, is it's all about abuse of power, and it's about that this current hierarchy encourages abuse of power, whether it be small or large, and the need to just have basic respect in this industry, like in other industries that needed to modernize, is still seems to be a world away. And that people are willing to kind of continue in a way, but then ask why people look down on wrestling. It's because the rest of the world is progressing around us while we aren't. And there has been progression. It's not entirely like it's not like the 80s or 90s anymore. No. But we are still stuck in this thing where these things can happen on a far more regular basis than they can in other industries. And I work in an industry, that had a hierarchy, that needed modernising, that had horrendous bullying that resulted in some truly awful things. And it needed stabilising. But, WWE is a public company. It's not enough to stabilise it. All this kind of media attention around the Janel Grant case, because they're very clever at their media strategy, has been kind of diverted to it's just Vince McMahon. But it's like the people that were, there were people that at least turned their eyes to it. There are so many stories. So they're not all gone, In fact, we celebrated some of them at the end of WrestleMania, So it's
But this is something that and I think this ties back, right? Because it's people would be like, oh, it's weird that you're tying the Punk stuff to the Janel Grant stuff, because like you said, it's about abuse of power, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that got brought up at one of the press events, which I can't remember which one it was, where people were asking questions because of the Jericho stuff, because of the things that had come out with the Houseman stuff, was what does Tony Khan do to make the industry feel safe, right? Yep. And he said, anyone can come talk to me at any time.
Yeah,
and this resonated with me this week, because I also was in a situation where there was a bunch of women who were in an opportunity to speak to an executive at our company. Mm-hmm. And we talked about and one of the things he hit on over and over again was, you can call me, you can text me if you have a problem at any time. And I know this is false, right? If I go to this executive and I say, this person at a point of power over me is making me feel uncomfortable, is being sexist towards me, makes little comments, right? Well, this guy makes a lot of money for my company. And I don't bring in a lot of income for my company. Do you think that they're going to get rid of him? I don't feel like I have a lot of confidence that they will. So I don't really feel like I'm going to rush over to say that's not a system that's in place for me to speak up. That doesn't make me feel comfortable to do that. Right? And that's the part where I feel like a lot of these well-intentioned and well-meaning men, because I do believe Tony Khan means this in the nicest way possible. Mm-hmm. I think he says this and genuinely thinks he means it. But the reality is life is a lot messier and business is a lot messier. And that's why you need processes and procedures in place for shit like this.
And I was like, I'll go back to the football comparison. That is somewhere where they have moved forward in some recent years, and, some behaviour like that is just not tolerated anymore.
Right.
And we're seeing a huge kind of movement forward in women's football, but also, a guy like Cristiano Ronaldo can't just get away with completely taking over the place and, bullying his teammates or that anymore. No, you're gone. Doesn't matter that you're one of the biggest football players in the world. How much revenue you're going to make. Actually, the team needs more to go forward. And it's just about how we progress from here, really. But it's kind of an open question that I just thought we kind of leave at the end. And it's going to come back up because this story isn't going away as much as people really want it to. And but it won't. And if we don't change anything and nothing changes and this continues, then there'll be the next one. And there'll be the next one. And people will continue to look down on wrestling. And people will continue to be harmed by wrestling, more importantly. And it can't continue. I don't think I have anything else to say there, really. I don't think there's anything else to add, so
I think we covered everything.
Yeah, I think that's the close. So, so sorry to end on that note, but we do want to cover important things, and we are aware that we haven't been able to cover this in much detail as we wanted to in the last few weeks, but it's an interesting discussion point. So if you do have any thoughts on this, any feelings, want to share anything, want to challenge anything, you can join us, talk directly either by email at trishandsarahpod@gmail.com, trishandsarahpod@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter. Sarah is at SarahGraps. I am at TrishSpears48, or you can find our pod Twitter at Trish and Sarah. You can also find us in the Social Suplex Discord. Please join, talk to us, talk all the cool things in Tunnel Talk. Go in, ask me about baseball. I don't know, whatever you want. But yeah, it's been great having that community grow and seeing kind of all the shows kind of benefit from it. It's been really awesome. We are part of the Social Suplex Network. You can find all the great shows through their feed or your own podcast provider. This week, go and check out the AEW World Champion on One Nation Radio if you've not seen that already.
It was awesome. It was
awesome stuff. Getting him in. He's it's like our talisman, isn't he, of our network now? So Swerve Strickland on One Nation Radio. That's the one to check out this week. We say very much thank you to producer Leah, who is with us again today, for doing such a phenomenal job. And we will see you again back on our 2-week schedule, maybe earlier. We'll see what happens. You never know. You never know.
We have plans and schemes.
Yeah. Maybe things in the works. We'll see how they go. So until then, I've been Trish.
I've been Sarah.
And this has been the Trish and Sarah Wrestling Podcast.